You too. How's everyone doing? Jags to Riches, James Peters. Thank you so much for your time. NBA Finals preview, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. We are going to take a look at the matchup in its entirety between the Boston Celtics and the Golden State Warriors. It has been an incredible journey for both of these, you know, historic. These are two of the top of the food chain organizations and franchises in the NBA. The Celtics, one of the most, I mean, come on now. We're looking for banner number 18. We're tied with LA at number one with most championships. You don't need me to go into a history lesson about the Celtics. However, the last 10 years, Golden State has turned itself into one of the greatest dynasties of all time. Some of those teams and runs they went on were absolutely incredible. And then if you just look at their player development and everything they've been able to accomplish there, it's like they're getting ready to, send out one, big three of Hall of Fame legendary champions, and how they're building up a bunch of other young up and coming greats with, a ton of potential with the Pools and Wiseman and Kumingas and Moody's. Like, what an impressive organization. So we're going to, briefly look at the head-to-head matchups. We're going to look at, obviously, their road to the finals, both teams. And then we're going to do some, player, their key players and some of their statistics, more so focusing on the all the playoff performances. So, again, we'll look at head-to-head matchups, road to the playoffs and road to the finals, and then some of their key players. But obviously, if you look at the head-to-head matchups, this is one of the unique ones where they only played twice. A lot of the times, especially, when you're going through the playoffs, these teams have seen each other 3-4 times in the regular season. You've got a good sample size. However, this and Eastern Conference, Western Conference only played twice. The first time, and before I get ahead of myself, Boston Celtics would finish with a record of 51 wins, 31 losses, lock up the number 2 seed. Golden State, 53 wins, 29 losses, locking up the number 3 seed. Now, the head-to-head, the two matchups, they would split one apiece. Now, the first matchup would be back in the 17th of December. Now, as a lot of people remember, that was when the Boston Celtics were at their lowest. That was when it was hashtag fire Ime, break up the Jays, trade Marcus. It was bad because that was the month where I believe we went 5-9 or 6-10. That was when we were, like I said, we would finish the month of December, I think, at like 17-19, and going into 22 is when obviously, things would start to turn around in the month of January. But the Celtics would lose that matchup 111-107. Now, just to give you an idea, at that time, the Celtics were 14-15, the record, and the Golden State Warriors were 24-5. So the Warriors were rolling. Steph Curry, he dropped a 30-piece on us that night. Wiggins actually had 27. Jason Tatum had a 27-piece. Jaylen Brown had 20. Marcus Smart had 19 points, 8 assists. Just to give you an idea, though, guys, Romeo Langford started for the Celtics that game. You know what I mean? So there was no Al Horford, no Grant Williams, no Dennis Schroeder. So we were starting Romeo, if that tells you anything. And it was still only 111-107. Now, the second time they would face was March 16th. So not that long ago. And that was when we were in the middle of our, a huge run when the Celtics would go on, 20-3 or, whatever it was. I think we had gone on that run right before the All-Star break, lost to Detroit. And then remember, I think we came back and started to go on another run, lost a game, and then went on a run again. I think Golden State was right in that mix. So we were hot, we were rolling. And unfortunately, we would win that game 110-88. And at that time, the Celtics were 42 wins, 28 losses. The Warriors were 47 wins, 23 losses. Now, that was unfortunately the game where Steph Curry was injured. The controversial Marcus Smart diving for the ball where all the people lost their damn minds. So Curry only played 13 minutes. He was 1 for 4, only had 3 points that night. However, that was kind of around the time of the Jordan Poole explosion because he actually had 29 points in 34 minutes. And I remember after that is kind of just when he started taking off and just, obviously that was the start of the Curry injury. And like I said, Poole exploded over that time. So Who else that night? There was no Andrew Wiggins for them, so they lost Curry. Didn't have Andrew Wiggins. Klay Thompson also contributed to 18 points, but we had Tatum and Jaylen Brown both had 26 points apiece. Smart had 20 points, 8 assists. So looking at, and I'll say that when it comes to the regular season, head-to-head matchups, it's all bullshit. I mean, it is, you especially when you look at this, because the Celtics of December are not the Celtics of March and are not the Celtics of, right now going into June. Nor can you say the same about the Warriors. Obviously, these teams have grown. They've gotten injured. There's a lot of things that have happened. Obviously, they've both gone on finals run. So a lot has happened over that time. So you can't, really judge those two games and put a lot of, stock into it, especially when one of them, the Celtics are starting Romeo Langford, and the other one, you're losing Steph Curry, and Wiggins isn't playing. So it is what it is. But when you look at each of these teams' road to the playoffs or through the playoffs to the finals, starting with Golden State, they would meet the Denver Nuggets in round one, in which they would actually beat them in 5 games. Obviously, the MVP, Nikola Jokic, kudos to him, but no Michael Porter Jr., no Jamal Murray. That's just such a tall task for them. And that was a series. Steph Curry averaged 28 points a game. Klay Thompson literally averaged 23 a game as well. They really put it on them in that opening round. And then they would go on to the Western Conference semifinals, and they would meet up against Memphis, the number 2 seed. Not a lot of hype behind Memphis, a little bit of a rivalry. Memphis sent them home the previous year in the whole play-in thing. However, obviously Golden State was hurt at that time, and now Ja Morant, he gets hurt. I think, maybe the middle, I think maybe actually towards the beginning, at some point early in this series, Ja Morant gets hurt. And that was another controversial Jordan Poole, what was it? You broke the code bullshit. But they would go on to beat them in 6 games. And that was another one. Curry averaged 26 points throughout. Klay Thompson would drop down to about 18 and a half. But you also would have guys like Wiggins, who throughout these entire playoffs has averaged about 16, damn near 17 points a game. And then you've had Poole, who's started, but more so come off the bench as like a spark plug for them. He's damn near average, 18 and a half. So they do have a lot of firepower for even when Klay has been cold at times. But shockingly, the Dallas Mavericks would upset the number 1 seeded Phoenix Suns. That was a favorited team heading into this after 60 plus wins. Monty Williams, coach of the year. They had gotten healthy. And unfortunately, Luka and Dallas were spectacular and ended up beating them and would go on. And Luka is one of those teams similar to like Miami. I think that they are still a star, at least a star player away. What Jalen Brunson did was admirable. Spencer Dinwiddie ended up being a good trade for Porzingis, but they really do need to. Imagine if like in another year, Joker says, I'm out of, Denver, and he wants to go team up with his Euro team boy, and, you get him and Luka pairing up in Dallas. Like, think of something like that, Or imagine Bradley Beal or, Dame Lillard. That's what I mean. Both of those teams, Miami, and we'll get to them shortly, but Miami and Dallas, I think that as good as those teams are, and especially like the directions they're going in, they're still a star away. So Golden State would beat them in 5. They nearly swept them, actually, and then Dallas obviously won Game 4. Steph Curry averaged 24 points, 7.5 assists throughout. Klay Thompson would average about 19 points throughout. You had Draymond averaging 11 points, 6.5 rebounds, nearly 6 assists. And then, like I said, looking over at the Boston Celtics side, Golden State, it would take, 16 total games for them to secure their finals appearance. And an incredible stat. I believe this is Curry's 13th season in the NBA. He's been to 6 finals. And I want to say it's 6 out of the last 8. If there's any Golden State fans or anyone that knows, correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe he's how many times? What does Steph have? 3 or 4 rings? Golden State fans, help me out. I know they won 1 without KD. Then they had the 2 with KD, but then they lost to Toronto and they lost to Cleveland. So are they 3-2? But regardless, yeah, I think they are 3-2 going into their 6th one right now. He's hungry for a Finals MVP. You see that storyline going all over the damn place right now. But moving over to a team I know a little bit more about, the Boston Celtics. Forgive me, Golden State fans. I should know that more. 3-2. I do. That is what their record is. 3-2. I know that. But Boston Celtics road to the finals, guys, would start with them sweeping the Brooklyn Nets. Now, don't read too much into that, because that was a competitive series. You're talking about a game one. It was a point buzzer beater by Jason Tatum. Every single game was a 7-point or less margin of victory. It was competitive, but they would go on to sweep a KD and Kyrie led, Seth Curry's little brother. So maybe a little bit of revenge there. And then we would go on to face Giannis and the defending champs in round two. And what an absolute classic it was. A back and forth, just slugfest. 7-game series, which would see the Boston Celtics face 2 elimination games in that series. They would go down 3-2 and head back to Milwaukee for a game 6 win, force a game 7, where Grant Williams would have a historic night from shooting when it came to like his 3-point, I think damn near whatever it was. It was insane, like 9 3-pointers in a quarter. I don't even remember what they did, but Grant Williams was a shining standout and set a career, I believe it was a career high, and like I said, a historic performance from 3 and a win that obviously clinched them their Eastern Conference Finals appearance. So it was just insane what Giannis was doing. He was on God mode, averaging like 35 and 15. He had multiple like 40 and 20 rebound games. And it was just the job that like the Grant Williams, the Al Horfords, that they did on both Kevin Durant and Giannis it was beautiful basketball. And even though Giannis had those crazy stats, still, if you watch the series, you know exactly what I mean. From an individual defensive standpoint, Al, Grant, they had some shining moments throughout that series. So moving on, that would set up an Eastern Conference Finals rematch with the Miami Heat. Obviously, the Miami Heat would beat the Celtics in 6 in the bubble year. That was the year that the Celtics were favored, supposedly had the better team going in. But I do want people to remember that was a team where Daniel Tice was our starting center, and we had guys like Brad Wanamaker was like one of our first guys off the bench in his freedom. You know what I mean? Like, so it is what it is. But and Kemba was banged up at that point. He started fading at that. So it was what it was. It's a completely different team, though, obviously. But that didn't stop it from being an absolute back and forth war. I mean, the Celtics, this was another one where when they won, their margin of victory was damn near like 20 points. Like, they would win big, but then there was just these other games where they would just let it slip through the cracks, one reason or another. Jason Tatum, back-to-back series, would his game 3. He would only score 10 points in winnable games. So some will argue they should have beat the Bucks in 5. And same with Miami. That could have gone 5 or 6, but the Celtics shoot themselves in the foot and play down, and the turnovers. I mean, there was some things that they definitely need to work on and tighten up prior to this finals against Golden State, because Golden State is a team that can make you pay, especially when it comes over to like points off turnovers. And we'll get to more of like some of their players in a second. But looking in that first round, guys, against Brooklyn, you would see Jason Tatum averaging nearly 30 points, shooting 45% from 3. Jaylen Brown averaging 22.5 points. You would have Marcus Smart averaging nearly 17 points and 7 assists. He was great. And then in that Milwaukee series, Al Horford, I mean, he was fantastic. I mean, he had that game 3 where it was a 30-point performance where he dropped the people's elbow on Giannis and that get-back dunk. I mean, he would actually average 13 and 10.5 throughout that series. I mean, he was great. Jason Tatum in that series against the Bucks, 28 points, 6.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists. Jaylen Brown again, 22 points. He was just Mr. Consistent with those 22s. Looking at the Eastern Conference Finals, you would have Marcus Smart average 16.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 6 assists. You would have Al Horford, 10 points, 10 rebounds. But again, look at Jaylen Brown, his best series yet against Miami. 24 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, shooting 38% from 3. Jason Tatum against Miami, 25 points, 8.5 rebounds, just under 6 assists while shooting 37% from 3. And, of course, they would win a Game 7 in dramatic fashion, like having a 10-point lead with a minute and a half to go. And then all of a sudden, Miami cuts it to 2, and the damn Celtics fans are on the edge of their seat. about to throw up with nausea because of how damn just as stressful this team has been. But they end up closing it out on the defensive end. Jimmy Butler takes that 3-pointer that's being talked about around the world, even though I love the shot, and I'll tell you what, everyone, was holding their breath. Every Celtics fan and player was holding their breath because I for damn sure thought that was in. I really did. I was like, oh my God, he's going to make that. It's over. But I did think like, well, shit, there still is 12, 13 seconds left. We do have enough time to get down and run up, So I was thinking of it like that. But as you know, guys, looking at some of the key players, we've mentioned them on both sides. There's a good chance if you look at the Celtics starting five, you've seen it. It's going to look something like this. Marcus Smart at the 1, the Jays with Jalen and Jason, Al Horford, and of course, Rob Williams. Now, on the Golden State side, you could see something similar to this. However, I would also imagine with us going with an Al Horford, Rob Williams lineup, that Jordan Poole probably will come off the bench for them, and you'll see a Kevon Looney. So it'd probably be Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Wiggins, Draymond, and Looney, with Jordan Poole as their 6th man off the bench. And of course, on the Celtics side, our rotation, and I believe both rotations will be pretty tight. I think on the Celtics side, you'll pretty much just see the starting 5 and then Derek White and Grant Williams pretty much as the 6 and 7 man. And then on the Golden State side, it's a little bit more interesting there because they have several players potentially coming back from injury. Otto Porter, Gary Payton II, Andre Iguodala. So several guys that have been dealing with injuries, but with the time off, you could see them come back at some point in the finals, I believe. But they've also got guys like Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga who have gotten some run recently. And then with our size, you could also see Nemanja Bjelica, the stretch 5, used to play for Sacramento. So, they have a few different options, guys, but all eyes will be on Jason Tatum and Steph Curry. Check this out, Landon. How about these graphics? So, the breakdown. I know a lot of you from Celtics Corner will be familiar with this, and this is actually something I did this morning. And the stats that I used were their stats from the playoffs only. So those for Jason Tatum will be for the 18 games he has played through the 3 series so far. And the same thing for Steph Curry. So this is obviously the Magic Johnson Western Conference Finals MVP award winner and the Larry Bird Eastern Conference Finals MVP award winner. And when you look at their stats throughout the playoffs, guys, it's pretty comparable here, is it not? Especially when you talk about, just go across the board. Points, 27 on the dot for Jason Tatum, literally 27.0, where Steph Curry's right at basically 26. And then you look at the assist numbers, right? Tatum, obviously his playmaking and the improvement in that area has been a big topic this year. And if you look at just his playoff runs, he's obviously in that opening round against Brooklyn, he averaged nearly 7.5 assists. And then these past 2, he averaged right at 5.4 against, against the Bucks, and 5.6 against the Miami Heat. So he's averaging right at nearly 6 assists throughout these playoffs. And then you got obviously Steph Curry with 6.2. Now Tatum is 6'9", whereas Curry obviously is a point guard, so the rebounding is going to be a little skewed. But there's still respect there to Curry, nearly right at 5 rebounds a game. But Tatum, creeping up on 7 at the 6.7, but then steals 1.2, 1.1. But then look at the 3-pointers, huh? You're looking at Tatum with the 37.5 to just Steph Curry's 38. Now, granted, Steph Curry is averaging, I believe, shooting 10 attempts a game, where, I'm sure Tatum's probably shooting quite a few less. However, if you talk about Curry, who is one of the greatest players of all time, he is the greatest shooter of all time without question. Right up there as arguably the best point guard ever, I would say, right there with obviously Magic Johnson, maybe the Detroit Hall of Fame, Isaiah Thomas, and a few others. But he is right up there considering as the greatest, Chris Paul. But on a very short list of the best when it comes to the point guard position. A multiple time champion, an MVP. He's done it all but won a finals MVP. So he should be pretty damn motivated. And I mean, the man has changed the game unlike, few others. And no one gives me more anxiety when you're talking about from an offensive end, like a guy that can just all of a sudden go for 50 any night, 60 any. I mean, he can just, when he gets in that rhythm, he's unguardable. He takes 2 steps across the half court and just is chucking. And it's just, you've got to anticipate that you'll see some of those games at some point. You know what I mean? It's just how quick and how hot he can get. And then Klay Thompson, you've seen him, some of those single game performances recently, the game 7. I mean, even though at times he seemed, a step behind, obviously coming off of just 2. I mean, speaking of that, man, shout out to Klay. What an amazing story coming off of those 2 back-to-back gruesome injuries with the Achilles and the knee. And it's just for him to come back and be in the finals again, man, shout out to Klay. Like I mentioned the other day, it's hard to not like Al Horford. It's hard to not like Klay. It's hard to not like Steph. I mean, this really is a badass finals, man. And it's not too many other teams I'd like to go up against and have an opportunity to win a championship against other than Golden State. Maybe the Lakers or something like that. However, I kind of do like the fact that their asses were sitting at home throughout the entirety of this playoffs. But again, guys, I just kind of wanted to briefly, take a look at this matchup. I'll be actually tomorrow on Celtics Corner. We'll be doing another finals preview. We're working on, obviously it'll be Bobby and I, but we're working on getting a few guests from the CLNS panel. So maybe a Celtics Corner versus CLNS. Stay tuned. We'll have to see. But I also believe on Thursday, I'll be doing something with Adam Taylor. So I'll be doing a couple other, final previews and throwing out a lot of content around the finals. But I'm also working on an Ime Udoka and Brad Stevens video that should be dropping at any time. So if you didn't get a chance, go check out my video yesterday. Actually, before I even get to that, I've been mentioning trying to hit the 400 subs, which we actually accomplished. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for all the new subscribers. I'm so honored. I'm so humbled, and I appreciate you more than you could ever know. If you didn't get a chance, go check out my video yesterday. It was just kind of my, celebration on the Celtics making the finals. But again, guys, thank you so much for your time. Jags to Riches, James Peters. I will see you tomorrow on Celtics Corner. Have an excellent conclusion to your day. Take care, guys. Thank you.